given such power. Thank you, Emily or Elizabeth, for giving me the power to start the webinar.
Awesome. Welcome everybody. I see them logging in. We will take about 2 minutes for everybody to get logged in and then begin.
Art, will you be introducing?
Sure, you can help out as much as you want, Dr. Ritter.
I'm open to I'm going to follow your lead. That's how it's worked the first couple. That's what I like.
It's all good. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
They're rolling in.
I'll let you kick us off, Gary, though. You can start.
Sure,
if you like.
Yeah, I see they're still coming. So I'm going to give it a couple minutes, a couple seconds. Perfect. It's a bit like popcorn. When they stop coming every 3 to 5 seconds, I guess they can get going. Well, I think this is a good time to get started. Welcome. My name is Gary Ritter. I'm the Dean of the School of Education at St. Louis University. And I'm thrilled that we're able to partner with Dr. McCoy, who is a Distinguished Research Fellow here at SLU and here at the School of Education. And Dr. McCoy has put together an excellent panel in our series of 3 panels of how we prepare to enter fall 21 in this, well, Art, you can share whether we want to call it DC or AC. I'm not sure where we're at. We keep bouncing around these days, where we're at with regard to the pandemic, but certainly this is a challenging time, and we have had 2 sessions so far, bringing together experts, panels of experts to talk about the challenges we might face as we re-enter school in the fall of 21, and some strategies to face those challenges. And Dr. McCoy, with that, I'd ask that you introduce your 3rd session and the great panel that you brought together.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with everyone. It's good to see people still logging in, and it's a pleasure to be with the beloved community and some of my most close and fabulous friends, colleagues, and leaders and champions who we have. I have to just be honest with everybody who's logging in. You need a board of directors right now, like never before, to help guide you. And on the screen with you today is my kind of secret cabinet of board of directors. Each of these people have been instrumental in helping not only me, but the entire region in a variety of ways to make sure that we stay healthy, safe, well, and learning during COVID. I want to introduce someone to you and to this community that you may or may not have seen before, but you will see more of because she has made history. She is our first African-American female in the role of Deputy Commissioner for the state of Missouri. Dr. Tracy Hines joins us. She's from the St. Louis area. I wanted to make sure that she was able to be here first to share a few words. She's triple booked with sessions, and she took the time to say greetings to you. So, Dr. Hines, say a brief greetings to the educators and leaders on board.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It is definitely a pleasure to be here with you virtually. And yes, I have completed my first full year of serving as Deputy Commissioner here at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And, you know, I know that everyone on this call has gone through a lot, and I just can't think of a better time to be in this role in education. Dr. McCoy talked about history. We are making history right now because we are rethinking how we provide additional supports to our students. We know that there are issues and challenges in front of us, but what can we do to make learning better for our students? How can we continue to help our children be innovators, and how can we rethink what education looks like for the future? I am born and raised in Missouri. If you want to be specific, Ferguson, Missouri, that's where I received all of my education. And so St. Louis, I represent the state, but if I'm being completely honest, St. Louis, I will always have a special place in my heart. I want to say thank you for everything you continue to do for our students. I'm pretty sure we all thought that we would be in a different stage right now in the pandemic. The pandemic had something different for us, but we will persevere. We will continue to move forward. And I encourage you to keep doing the work. Our children, our communities are counting on us, and we have to remain healthy, both physically, mentally. And I encourage you to continue to serve our students to your best abilities. And please seek help from us if there are any supports that we can provide for you at the department level. Please feel free to share your ideas, because we are in this together, and we have to meet the success of all our students and meet our students where they are, and continue to serve all of our students across the state of Missouri. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to be with you briefly. I am so excited about our next steps here in education as we continue to make history in education, particularly in the state of Missouri. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Commissioner Hines. It's so good to see you, and thank you for being with us. So I wanted all the viewers to see this entire panel, and you now see the panel view. So this is our third and last session that I've entitled really AC, BC, and DC. So I want you to know that AC, BC, DC is the framework that we utilized in the district that I just previously left as Superintendent Jennings School District for after COVID is no longer a threat to our life or way of life. And we kind of set that to be the 22-23 school year. BC is not before Christ, before Common Era, but it is before COVID entered our world, March 2020 or before. And DC is the range that we're in right now, which is living and educating and learning during COVID, where COVID is affecting how we do schooling, how we learn, our mental health, our teacher rate and educator rate of retention, and much, much more. COVID transmission, and even now the new Delta variant. So having given that description of us being in DC, not District of Columbia, but in an era of living during COVID, the panel that you see on the screen are the foremost experts in the United States and beyond for the areas that we just discussed. I'm going to introduce each of them, but I just want to say thank each of you right now for joining us and for helping us to make this successful session on how to thrive in the 21-22 school year, addressing mental health, addressing wellness, education retention, as well as burnout. That is our topic for today. We have about 80 minutes to have a free-flowing discussion. This is one of those conversations, just like I do it on the phone with each of these individuals that are here. They are amazing in their own right. They have a lot of nuggets of knowledge, and then they will have follow-up information to share with you if you need to get in contact with them. So let me first start off by introducing a dear friend from the Department of Education who I've worked with for many years, and we are not just colleagues, but dear friends in the sense of, I recall seeing him on the side of Highway 40, giving him a device that we both left at a meeting together in St. Louis City, and I'm like, that's my brother. And I was glad that we caught each other. So that was the last time we physically saw each other. But nonetheless, his name is Dr. Paul Kechnick, and he is the foremost expert for teacher retention, teacher quality, and he is in charge as Assistant Commissioner of the Department of Education for teacher quality for the state of Missouri. Welcome, Dr. Kechnick. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Dr. McCoy. It's great to be here.
We have specific things that each person will mention, so I'm going to introduce everyone next on our roster connected to the issue of education and educators and leading to help educators is an expert and a leader and the first Black female to be the president of this Missouri Association. We have the president of the Missouri Association of Pupil Personnel with us, and she is the first African-American female president, as well as the first African-American female president of the St. Louis chapter. She is a resident expert chief HR officer for the Jennings School District, and she is a giving person who is a Delta, who is all about service and all about loving communities, Miss Stephanie Alexander. Thank you for being with us today, Miss Alexander.
Thank you, Dr. McCoy. Good seeing you.
It's great to see you. Next, we will shift to the area of medicine. You've seen him on Channel 5 at least a good, I'm sure, 50 times. I call him the answer guy because any question that people have about COVID-19, it always goes to Jason. And he is the best at making sure that we have common sense answers, solutions, and real tactical strategies, not just running into the hype and believing the hype, but believing the science and doing what's best to keep our kids safe. Dr. Jason Newland is an MD from Washington University. He helped us to start school first as early as June and July in person in Jennings, and he has been helping the entire region, leading the CDC studies for COVID transmission, vaccinations, as well as incubation times and quarantine times and when you could return to school. Dr. Jason Newland, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
It's great to see you. Next is my dear, dear friend. She keeps us all sane, certainly me. Even before COVID, I have to say, I reached out to her and she reached out to me and we connected in a mighty way to help start something called parent-child interaction therapy that she created and is a forerunner in being like an international leader for that type of therapy, but not only in the clinics, but in schools. We sought her out and she was seeking a good district when we had a lot of epidemics before this pandemic, the epidemic of gun violence, murders, and deaths among domestic violence situation. And we lost a student in our school district. And this person came into our district and into our lives in a mighty way to help repair the injuries that death can bring and that trauma can bring and that ultimately epidemics as well as a pandemic can bring. Her name is none other than Dr. Joan Luby, the chair of psychology for Washington University's School of Psychology and Medicine, as well as a consummate researcher who does hands-on action and works with parents, students, staff, and more. Dr. Luby, thank you for joining us today.
Oops, thank you. I'm honored to be here. I was on mute there. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. I was going to say, I never catch Dr. Luby off guard, so I know it must be the computer freezing up because she's always on point. Thank you for joining us. So let's jump right in. I'm going to start with, since we have a lot of educators on the line, and I saw we have at least 20 or 30 HR professionals, I want to jump right into the question first about that you asked when we got into this session. Two questions came from you. I want to start with you from the beginning, but I also want to tell all of our viewers, please chat in the chat box if you have any questions, any comments, any reactions. Feel free to chat constantly because we're monitoring them and watching it. Dr. Gary Ritter, the Dean of St. Louis University, is here. He'll be tag teaming with me to make sure we get questions answered, information addressed, and the conversation flowing. And I want to thank Elizabeth, Nutt, and Emily for helping to make this be successful. Let's start with Dr. Kechnick and, of course, Mrs. Alexander. We will go to the first question. Dr. Kechnick, please share with us a little bit of a recap of the status of like education retention and its issues last year from the beginning of this pandemic and what we're looking like statewide as we enter the next school year. That's the first question.
Okay, I want to start with a couple of truths that I think we can all agree on. And the first one is that the best place for kids to be is in the classroom with teachers. That's where folks kind of need to be. And the second truth, which research really substantiates, is that the number one factor in a student's learning above all other factors is the quality of the teacher. And so what I'd love to say is that some of the data we have been tracking was all pandemic caused. And once we get over the pandemic, we'll be in good shape, but I can't say that. For the last 6-8 years, we have seen some percentages that are concerning. Our number one asset, teachers, have been in decline in terms of on campuses studying to be teachers. We're in a 25% decline over the past 6 years, meaning basically less people want to do the job of teaching. And then when we check our retention rates, we find that at the 3-year mark, we retain just 64% of brand new teachers, meaning if we were all new teachers, only 2/3 of us would finish year 3, go to year 4. At the 5-year mark, it's just 48%, meaning by the time you get to year 5, half of all new teachers have already left and are doing something else. And these are the most important asset for our kids. And those percentages were in place before the pandemic showed up. And I think the question now for everybody is, has the pandemic helped us in this respect, or has it not helped us in this respect? And most people are going to guess that given the challenges of this past year on teachers, that it's probably made things worse. There was an excellent article put out by an associate professor in California that came out just this week, talking about the issue and what has been the most exhausting parts of the pandemic. And one of the things that she cited was teachers feeling like they're not in control of the situations that they're trying to control to the best that they can. It's the reason that this week at our administrators conference, we hosted a panel of teachers of the year. These are finalists or winners of teacher of the year on the topic of teacher leadership and teacher voice, and how important those are, especially in times like this, to get the teacher's perspective in there. And one of the things that she points out that I found really interesting is, even though we're not seeing this mass exodus of teachers this spring, like people wondered if we would, there's actually some really good reasons that we aren't. The state of the economy, labor market challenges of learning during a pandemic, work contracts, healthcare needs, family responsibilities, the need for a transition plan. But the question, I think, is if we were already struggling to have enough teachers to fill our classrooms, and by the way, there's at least one school district in the state that went virtual, not because people were in quarantine, because they didn't have enough adults to put in classrooms, right? If that's the kind of staffing challenges that we've been faced with, and then the pandemic hits and we bring on this exhaustion to teachers, perhaps they didn't all leave this spring, but has the seed been planted? And when some of these other situations resolve themselves, will we begin to see teachers exit the profession? One of our other findings was that these were teachers with 10 plus years of experience, which are the ones who have hit their groove. You know this, Dr. McCoy, they hit their groove, they know what they're doing, they serve as mentors. You know, they're such an asset to a school district and a school beyond teaching in the classroom, that's the group. And by the way, if you didn't know, the average Missouri teacher in the biggest group of Missouri teachers we have in our state have less than 5 years experience. And the next biggest group have 6 to 10. Half of the teachers in our state have less than 10 years of experience. And that's the group of teachers we have now. And there's every reason to believe that we're going to take a hit kind of on what the pandemic's done here. And keep in mind, kids need to be in school, and the number one asset is a great quality teacher. And both of those right now are kind of under stress.
So well put. Over 50% or at 50% of the teachers with less experience than most. That's amazing. And then the fact is, the quality teacher makes the difference in the life of a child. We know children should be at school. Thank you, Dr. Technic, for those points. So that makes me pivot to Mrs. Alexander, who really was so wise about 4 or 5 years ago. She did something so innovative. She said, as an HR officer, I want to hire full-time therapists for teaching staff just to deal with mental health and secondary trauma before the pandemic. And I have to give her credit for doing that, because I called some other colleagues in St. Louis public schools and others, and they were scared, to be frank. They're like, oh, what about the liability? And in our conversations, it's like, no, the need is greater than the liability. Let's do this. So I want to ask you, Ms. Alexander, what are some of the best practices that you share with your colleagues, HR professionals, and that you advise to principals and leaders, because I know we have principals on the line and other best practices for mental health management and wellness, as well as retention of your leaders and your teachers?
That's a great question, Dr. McCoy, and that the answer is always changing, to be honest, because one, you as a leader, you have to recognize your people. You have to know the people that you serve. And so being in education, we are all about service, and we serve the people. So we do understand that our students are our number one priority in everything we do, from the top down, from the superintendent to the custodian, is all about students. However, our human capital is the second most important thing that we have in any school district. So you have to take care of the people. Taking care of the people is not just about saying, hey, I need you to teach in a classroom. It's about getting to know you, building those relationships. When you have something wrong, you can come to the HR office, and the HR office is not this place where you have to be intimidated. It's an open door where you can have an open conversation. And so being able to do those things and have those strategies, and understanding that we're human and life happens. It doesn't happen when we always want it, and some things life pivots, and you have to turn, and we have to be able to support them And so for us in Jennings, when we had the mental health therapist, it also pushed us to understand that we give out EAP information. However, our staff doesn't always use that EAP information for themselves. And so taking that turn to say, I care enough about you to have somebody here for you to talk to is a good mental health and wellness piece, but it's also a retention piece because they know that I can come and talk to somebody here within my district. Also, leadership has a lot to do with that piece of retention. And so having those open conversations, being an active listener, engaging your teachers into the decision-making process where they have a voice and they have an active voice, not that they say things and it falls on deaf ears, but you actually internalize and use those ideas for the betterment of the district, which is also going to better to serve the students. So communication and having those authentic relationships are some of those top things.
Communication and authentic relationships. I thank you. That resonates in my spirit because I mean, I'm sitting here and I remember the times and the comments that we would have that were just always real. We were always real. We would always have to love our people more than we ultimately even love safety or comfort, and then make the tough decisions to do what's best for our people and our children. Sure. Thank you for that. So that leads me to Dr. Newland and Dr. Luby. I'm going to ask in that order, Dr. Newland and then Dr. Luby, the key questions, and they were texted in advance as well as they're on people's mind right now. So as Alexander said, the need changes. And I often say you have to move at the speed of the need to support people. So what is this new Delta variant? How contagious is that among young children, the Delta variant? And what COVID safety protocols should remain in place this fall in light of the Delta variant? That was a question from one of the registrants. Go for it, Dr. Newland.
So thanks again, Dr. McCoy, and it's really an honor to be on this illustrious panel. It's great to learn from everybody. So the Delta variant. Well, let's be first and clear. People are asking me, hey, Jason, do we know if that person had the Delta variant? We should all just stop and say, look, if someone recently has COVID-19, it's most likely the Delta variant. We've heard more and more data about, the July 17th data said 82% of our the samples or positives that have been sequenced were Delta variant. So just make the assumption that any positive you hear is probably the Delta variant until we get the new variant. I think that needs to be thought of. Now let's talk about transmissibility. We've heard this, right? Like now you heard, I think the most recent CDC, they always try to make you, guide you and think about, they're saying it's as contagious as chickenpox. So I don't many people on this Zoom might remember, maybe they were one that got put with another person that had chickenpox. They knew if you got near them, you're going to get it, right? And the notion is that, they had chickenpox parties. And I'm not telling anybody to go get a COVID party, but this was done, right? Because then you would have it. So it's pretty transmissible. And there's this notion that the amount of virus that is present is about 1,000 times more than the original strain. Now, we need to be very clear about this. These studies that are done when they look at the amount of virus they're not looking to say, okay, I check how much virus you had and I see how much of that virus is infectious. That does not happen. We do it on kind of one would say a rough bit, say, I think that's about, but it is definitely more transmissible. I can tell you in working and testing and working in these school districts. And nowadays we're seeing whole families get sick, right? So you get the unvaccinated person who's in the family, and instead of about half getting it, like what we saw originally in the original studies, now it seems like everybody gets it, including the young children, I think, which goes to this notion of, okay, is it more transmissible with young children? Because remember, you look at New York City at the very beginning of the forest fire COVID-19 they experienced, they had daycares open the whole time. The healthcare workers needed someplace, and they saw none of these outbreaks. Now, that we're not seeing a lot of daycare outbreaks. We've heard of a couple, so I think that's still good. But there's no doubt it's more transmissible. We're seeing more young children infected. All right, so I think this is translated to children's hospitals across the country have just seen more cases. And whether it's more severe or not, we're seeing more cases. I still think we need to know that data. So let's get to the next most important question is, what do we do going into school? How do we do this? We hear this, oh my goodness, the Delta variant. Well, let's see where we've been. And let's talk about where we're going. I've always loved the
Beautiful.
DC AC, but I was hoping it was just going to be BC AC. Now we have to always say DC, right? Because it is during COVID. I know it's really driving me crazy, but that's where we are. So, we have learned tremendous amount of stuff on how to do this. And I don't think it matters what variant it is. Putting on a mask, using distancing, keeping people out that are sick in our school environments is going to work, whether it's alpha, beta, zeta, whatever variant we're talking about, that's going to work. Now you add on vaccination to what we learned worked in schools last year. As Art mentioned, we were part of studies that showed really low transmission when you do the things that Dr. McCoy, Dr. Alexander, Dr. Hardin, Dr. Davis, all these wonderful leaders and their staff did to make school safe. They can still be safe, but that means we have to do the things, masking it for everybody, whether you're vaccinated or not. We need a mask. The amount of disease that's present is too high to think that we can have an option or not. I think, and I'm going to say that, and I'm going to keep saying that when we look at currently what's going on in our community and look, frankly, across the country. We keep people out that are sick. We wash our hands, we use ventilation, and we vaccinate. And mind you, that's what we know. That's a new thing, really, right? We just started vaccinating the the 12 to 17-year-olds at the end of school. Thankfully, we got a lot of the educators vaccinated. Now we add the 12 to 17-year-olds, and let's keep promoting vaccination. Vaccination is providing better protection than natural infection, and it has continued to protect us against variants. And there's no reason to think it's not going to protect against future variants. That might change.
That's so good.
That might change, but that's something out there. Oh, geez.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I thank you for those solutions in the midst of the problem. One question came: what happened to the old COVID strand? Did it just get eliminated by the Delta variant? And of course, I know the issue of mutations, but give us a common sense, quick answer to how did it just get erased or taken away, or the old strand?
Survival of the fittest, right? I mean, essentially, when you're a virus, if you're a virus, all you care about is finding another person, getting in the cells, and to make more of yourself. So the virus that can do that the best takes over, right? Because then that's the only person you see. It becomes the one, and that's what we're seeing. And that's also important to think about, because when the virus makes more of itself, it's not perfect, so it kind of messes up every once in a while. That genetic code kind of messes it up. And then guess what happens? You get another variant that becomes a little better at infecting, spreading, pushes out the next one. And that's the concern, is because if we get to a variant that becomes the ability to escape immunity, because it changes that spike protein enough, that protein that lets it gets into our cells. Now we're talking more vaccines, and that's the piece we keep. But again, I'm going to say it because I don't want to end on that. I want to end on the fact that our vaccines are working fabulously against the Delta variant. They continue to work. 95% of people in the hospitals are unvaccinated. When you look at those of the 5% that's vaccinated, they're usually people with underlying immune issues that might make them not respond to the vaccine as well, which means more people get vaccinated, especially around those who won't respond as well, the better we're going to be. Okay, sorry, I went too long.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, you teed me up for asking Dr. Luby a specific question, but before I do that, I'm going to say, Jason and I were betting each other, and I said, "You're going to owe me dinner, brother." He's like, "I'm going to pay you dinner if by December, we had a combination of both COVID as well as the flu issue taking things to a level that was just insurmountable." He said, "No, the flu will be dying out because COVID is stronger, faster, better, and we're going to be all right with the mask." He was right. And that's the common sense answer to how these variants become stronger, because the weaker virus loses, the stronger one wins by survival of the fittest. And that's how we had the lowest number of flu cases in I would say, in many decades because of the pandemic of COVID taking that. So thank you for that very great explanation and explanation of what to do as well. Masking, vaccine, having vaccinations, and distancing as solutions. As we segue to other solutions to the ultimate question that Ms. Alexander helped tee up, that you have to move with the issues to constantly meet the new needs, I want to ask Dr. Luby what we should be doing for our mental health needs. So let's say we have the vaccination, but this Delta variant is still scary. I got to see kids who aren't vaccinated between ages 4 for preschool through ages 12 for middle school or elementary school. How do we address mental health? What should we be doing as educators and as adults to support that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think that the issue of COVID really the bright side of that was that it really sort of brought into bold relief the importance of mental health issues, because we know that this has really escalated the rates of mental health problems in children. And these things were important before, but now we're sort of forced to address them. And, you know, one of the things that's sort of key to the program that we've been working on in the Jennings School District, and that we continue to move forward in the broader St. Louis area, has to do with focusing on the issue of emotion development in children. And you could even think of it as sort of emotional intelligence from the framework of education, and just how important these elements are to children, and really for their sort of ability to thrive cognitively and for their general well-being. So I think this provides us an opportunity to begin to really focus on that more formally in schools, to give teachers tools to deal with it, and also to provide programming that can help parents address it at home, because this is going to be something that it's a stressor that's shared by all, and it provides really an opportunity for kids to be empathizing with each other, to be understanding the fear and anxiety and the other types of changes that are taking place in their lives as a result of COVID, the kinds of stresses that that have been put into their families' units. So I think the answer to that question would be that I think we need to really be focusing on children's ability to express their emotions, to understand their emotions, to understand other children's emotions and other people's emotions, and for teachers and children to begin to focus on that more formally, not to think of that as something that's interfering with the educational process, but this is actually a part of the educational process.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. I'm tempted to pull up a PowerPoint, but I promise that this is a no PowerPoint zone. But Dr. Luby, yeah, we love that, because this is a conversation. But Dr. Luby's so on point. I got this page, just Google it, called the 6 questions to ask, but it's 6 hats that you wear in education. So we need to ask, how are you feeling? So that's the feeling hat, and it's like green. And if you're feeling good, and I usually do this in my sessions, honestly, and so I want to do it now because I walk the talk. I don't just talk the talk. For the 55 people on the line, I want you to chat in here. Where are you on your mood elevator? Right now, what is your mood? How do you feel? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel nervous? Do you feel happy? Do you feel excited? Do you feel like it's a challenge? Do you feel maybe fearful, afraid? Chat in, if you're on your computer, I know some of you are on your phone, where you are on the mood elevator. Right now, that's a task I'm asking you to do right now. Chat in on the mood elevator. It's so important for us to know and start off with where you are. I thank you, Latasha, relax. Lena, excited. I see others, positive. Miss Joyce, thank you. And keep going, because that means that this environment is the right environment for us to be having a head discussion. First, it's a question of our heart. Anxious, nervous, but hopeful. Thank you so much, and I appreciate that. Tisha, my dear sister from Pattonville, relaxed. Excited, Patricia, Molly, pensive but hopeful. That is so important, because this is now the rudiments of every lesson. You should start off with the question of, where are you on your mood elevator? Thank you, Rhonda. You're happy and you're always anxious. So that's something to know. Whether it's an anxious that's pandemic related, DC, or whether it was a BC issue before the pandemic, it was there. These are the elements that the hat number 1, how are you feeling? Hat number 2, do you have the resilience to move yourself from that point of hopeful, thank you, Tabitha, in the elevator, to, let's say, now action oriented? Reverend Austin, positive and hopeful, for sure. Always, he's always that. What is our level of resilience? And then as a teacher teaching students, how can we help give and facilitate that level of resilience and that level of it being okay to say, I'm not okay. I'm not okay today. So that's huge. Thank you, Gary. Gary is grateful. I love the alliteration. So thank you, Dr. Luby. That is so essential. I want to ask Dr. Ritter's question to you in this way. So he said higher ed is making people take the vaccine at WashU and SLU and so forth. But the pandemic has almost, in my opinion, caused us to have to redefine the definition of safety in our school and college policies, because safety used to mean active shooter, but the pandemic has made us do a lockdown like never before, quarantine. So how do we, or do you feel like we're adequately addressing as leaders the mental health issue of the definition of safety changing because the threat of life and death is just by seeing someone? How do we address that? And is there any advice you would give on addressing the definition of safety for others, including vaccinating at the higher ed? Is that safe enough, or should more be in place as a normal routine, Dr. Luby?
So yeah, that's a really great point. I mean, I do think we do have to address the fact that children and their parents are walking around feeling less safe. They're feeling more threatened. Of course, there's a variety of opinions on whether people think the vaccine is safe or whether they think it's not safe. And of course, that's something that, you know, we just have to sort of educate the public as much as we possibly can with, you know, the scientific facts about that. But I mean, I think the discussions of the sense of whether you feel safe or unsafe is very, very important to explicitly have those in the schools and to talk about what are the conditions that make you safe so that children really understand and begin to feel comfortable in the classroom. So I do think that has to become an explicit agenda and an issue for teachers to take up.
Exactly right. Explicit. Thank you. So that takes me to Dr. Keknik, because that is a key question that I want to share and have him share with others. So what actions might DESE be encouraging, supporting, advocating for students and educators to remain safe and well during school? And I just want to give a little teaser of an answer that I was pleased to be a part of your new social emotional learning pilot last year. You can say a word about social emotional learning if you want, but go wherever you want to go with that. What type of supports is DESE providing for the notion of safety and helping people remain well as they come back in just 3 weeks?
You know, I think one of the things you're always going to hear DESE say is follow the experts and follow the science. These folks who know about these variants and stuff know the best way to deal with those, the best way to deal with them in schools. But I think something that needs to be on our radar, and it's really building off of what Dr. Luby and Ms. Alexander said, we are really going to have to take care of our people, right? So when you think about, Ed Week just came out with an article, a study this week on attrition rates and what their predictions were based on their studies for attrition, teacher movement, teacher quitting, right? Typically in our nation, it's about 8% from year to year. And based on this study they had, they were predicting maybe as much as 20% as we work our way through this. And as a point of comparison, nationwide, we're at 8%. In the state of Missouri, we run 11 to 11.5%. So if nationwide is going to go to 20, what's our state going to kind of go to? And it says we're going to have to find a way to care for those people that are in our schools doing the work. And this article was very interesting about what it is that burned out our teachers the most. Let me read this to you if I can. To see a teacher instructing in blended hybrid mode is to watch a complex juggling act. Multiple devices at work, students on screens, students in the room, chat boxes, emails, attachments, Padlets, PDFs, handouts, hands in the air, and a teacher is trying to juggle all of that. They found that student achievement was actually higher when you're all in person, followed by all virtual. But that the place where it started to fall off is when you had this mixed hybrid. I'm listening to Dr. Newland and thinking, I think we're in for a year of quarantine coming, right? With this variant running around, there's going to be times where a whole bunch of kids are okay and they're in the class, and there's going to be ones who aren't. And the person navigating the middle of that are going to be our teachers. And if we don't find a way to take care of them and address their stress and all the demands that they're having, we are going to see those attrition rates. And that won't be good for any student in our school.
Spot on. That's right on point. Ms. Alexander, talk to us about how you know we did that and how you were going to continue to do that if that need occurred. Like I recall us taking off all right after Thanksgiving because it was just a smart thing to do because you follow the science and you keep people safe. And then going when others were like, no, we're not going to go. And we're like, no, we have the protocol. So talk a little bit about navigating those waters, Ms. Alexander.
So really, we definitely have to follow the science and look at the data, especially the data within our communities. And so we really have to truly stay on top of the data of the 5 square miles that we serve and our surrounding districts, because we know that our families and our teachers, they live in other places and things like that. And it's truly about the adults. When we talk about transmission that we found, it was the adult transmission that we had, and we had very minimal transition, but when we had transmission, it was adults. And so making sure that we're staying on top of the science, making sure that we have protocols in place with our daily screeners, our temperature checks at our schools. If you are sick, do not come, because there used to be a point in time where, you know, you had a cough, you made teachers come to work, and it was like, no, you got to be here. Yes, we want you here for students, but in this day and age, if you come in sick, we don't know if you have COVID, because COVID has symptoms just like the common cold, the flu. And so we want you to stay at home. And so we have to be flexible in our thinking as we support our educators, as we support our students, because even when our students are feeling ill, we put them in isolation rooms and things like that, just to protect everyone around us, because we are in the unknown. And so because we are in the unknown, we have to do things in our community, in our schools, that are much different. And we're going to have to continue to do that in order to keep our people safe.
Very good. I appreciate that. It's important that leaders, superintendents, principals, and others, and HR officers tell other leaders and teachers and staff that you have permission to be at home. You have permission to not come in, and actually you have almost an expectation to keep you safe, others safe, and it's okay to pause for that, because by not pausing, you might take out a whole classroom by you just showing that grit and coming in for a day when you didn't feel the best, but you just wanted to tough it out. You may shut down a whole class or school or something, or hurt someone. So having permission to say when things are questionable is so key, that environment, that feedback loop, and following the data and the science. Dr. Newland, two key questions. One person wrote the question of, okay, I'm someone that may, or if someone may have pre-existing conditions and they got a vaccination, the question is a booster shot being recommended, or something likely to be recommended pretty soon? That's number one. And question number two is, do you have any predictions about when approval of vaccinations may occur for children under 12? And I know you do, because I can give that answer myself.
Yeah.
That's right.
No, unfortunately, it's been changing. Okay, so go to the first question about boosters. I think that soon we likely will hear about boosters for those who have these underlying conditions that set you up potentially to have a less robust immune response. What I want to make people understand is that we hear about, let's test antibodies, let's see what your antibodies are, right? Because that's what we've learned, right? Oh, I got to make sure I got all these fighting things that, go there. But what you got to remember is, if you remember getting that second shot, because I think most people get Pfizer and Moderna, or you remember even getting the Johnson & Johnson, you kind of felt not right. Like most people, and some that did not, but that's because you're another part of your immunity, your memory part of your immunity is getting engaged. Essentially, you are kind of leading to this other big response. And that you can't measure that with just a simple antibody test. And this memory part of your immunity, especially with this virus, which takes about, 3 to 5-ish days, 3 to 7-ish days to like get going in your body, get your body time to set up its memory. I mean, this is so, but those with less responses and the immune compromised, because we're seeing them more in the hospital, I do think they'll get another shot. Now, let's talk about just everybody in general. That's another big debate, right? Like we've heard Israel's now starting to give this next shot. The technologies that set up to make it easy to throw in a new variant, and if we need one, I actually believe that and I could be wrong, you're going to hear just my opinion in looking at everything, is I think when we get a strain or a variant we think is really escaping our immunity, I think that's when we're going to get our quote unquote booster. Because you're going to need a new shot to bolster that. And that's going to be continued to look just like the flu shot. And that's what they're going to be looking as. And now, is that going to be for everybody this year? Probably not. Is it going to be next year? I don't know. But the data is very interesting on that. And then your next question, because I just yapped for too long.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna say it again. When will those 12-year-olds and younger get the vaccination?
My favorite question. When are they going to get?
Yeah.
Yeah, my
That's
favorite
right.
question.
Now, when we last talked,
I
and
know.
this was a while ago, the answer was possibly September for Pfizer and maybe January for Moderna. Now the cheese has been moved. But what's the answer
The
today?
cheese has been moved, man. All right, so I got a newer insider information that makes me think that I've actually had changed even since we've talked to more October, November.
Wow.
There's been some recent developments where they're increasing some of the number of participants they're wanting. So it looks like we're talking for Pfizer is probably going to be November to December, I'm going to say now. I've even had to change presentation slides to recalibrate after hearing some new information. And Moderna, there's no way, I'll just say this. If Moderna happens by the end of this year, because they said let's just put
It'd be a miracle.
Yeah, yes. Because
It'd be a
they
miracle.
haven't even started their randomized trial in the younger age group. I think Moderna might come out with their 12 to 17-year-old approval.
Right.
So, and I think the last piece, and I want to bring this up. Sorry, I'm hijacking this a little bit.
No, this is good.
People want to know about why hasn't there been full licensure in Pfizer? They've submitted this, like what, and you've heard this. Well, maybe it's not as good as is. Well, the reason is because it's not as simple as, oh, let's look up all the data and it's good, and then we're going to give you full licensure. Oh no, the FDA goes through every process to make the vaccine, what the products you're getting, how you're going to go through the procurement and the sending out. I mean, it is in-depth details of how you even make the vaccine and then distribute it and deliver it. It's more than just whether or not you have, the clinical trial. They want to make sure you can make it correctly. So that's why it takes so long, right? And I was like, oh yeah, that makes complete sense. So the full licensure will come. It likely will come in September. It's a little longer than I thought, but I think that's the reason for that. But then unfortunately, our younger age group's a little longer than I was hoping to be able to say today.
Well, I have to thank you for helping us to get really, I think it was 6-month-olds into the trial. There's research going on, and we got the word out, and over 5,000 parents said, "Hey, let us be a part of it." Now you're at 10,000 parents.
Well, we had to shut it down, but I should say we have 10,000 children. So it's unbelievable.
To 10,000 children. That's amazing. I tried to get one more family into it because they were begging me to, and you had to text me and say, "Yeah, we closed down. We can't do it." 10,000 children from 6 months to all the way to 16 are doing the vaccination trials as we speak. And I know you're not going to speak out of turn and say what the data is showing, because that would be horrible to mislead. But the fact that it's happening is possibly a great thing. Haven't heard of any deaths yet, which is great. And so things are looking optimistic. Ms. Bell asked the question about, or is it being tracked? When people get COVID after taking the vaccinations, which one they actually took. And I know the answer to that is by all means, yes. I'll say the baseball study let me know that, the baseball players who got Johnson & Johnson, that was the first out for, hey, you're not immune, you can still get it. And now, most recently, Martha's Vineyard, which I almost went to for the August Jazz celebration, but I'm glad I didn't, because they took something that was not Johnson & Johnson, which means it was the stronger and really had a population of widespread. So one thing Jason said that I want to reiterate from Patricia's question is this: when they add in, it's from Rhonda's question, when they ask you to do a booster, it will be more than likely because that version of the variant is so strong that you needed a booster. That he said a mouthful. So when you watch the media and they start to say boosters, then track the data to see what this new variant might be that may be helping to urge the boost, because you have an immune system that's doing pretty decently right now with the normal vaccination. But the moment that the booster is introduced, there could be a change in the data. Very good point. Thanks.
Yeah, and I just say, I think it's still important to know, even with the Martha Vineyard, that outbreak stuff, it's still, the vaccine is doing exactly what we wanted to do, which is keep people out of the hospital. I mean, if we would have gone back in July of 2020 and they said, hey, Jason, what do you want the vaccine effectiveness to be with these trials? What do you hope it shows? I would have taken 60% in a heartbeat, done backflips and said, and you say that's the effectiveness and it prevents against severe and life-threatening disease, sign me up. But the bar got set high, right? We had these two amazing vaccines that got 90, 95%, both in the clinical trials and in real world settings. So I know people are like, oh, I'm so disappointed. I had someone the other day, I said, you're vaccinated? No, but he goes, can't you get it if you get the vaccine? I'm like, well, let's hold on a second. Yeah, you can get it, but let's be clear. You're not going to end up in the hospital. And I can tell you, I've known a few people that have gotten it, been vaccinated. I'm like, I'm so glad you got the vaccine because I'm not sure you're here if you didn't have the vaccine.
Exactly
I
right.
think we still need to remember that as we go forward.
Thank you so much. Dr. Luby, mental health. Now, I'm gonna throw a curveball here for a second, but you're perfect for like knocking it out the park still. So I really think that you said it best when you said this situation has given us permission to talk about something that's been needed to talk about way before this. I couldn't agree more because I match mental health with the epidemics of being female in a workspace and a leader and having to deal with sexism. That's still really tough. Being a Black male or a person of color. And I view mental health as the other side of the DIE coin. And I don't call it DEI, I call it diversity, inclusion, and equity, because people die if you aren't inclusive and equitable within the diversity space. So I want you to just talk a little bit about the mental health of if you're dealing with a boss or a leader, or in the case of Florida, a governor who's like, if you make a mandate to vaccinate, we're taking your state funding away as a school leader. How do you navigate that as a leader? How do you lead with mental health cognizance or being conscious, mental health consciousness? And that's called conscious leadership at this point. What advice would you give for us as leaders to lead with mental health consciousness?
Yeah, I mean, wow, that's really a great question because, of course, things like are happening with the governor of Florida and things like are happening, in so many not little, unfortunately, in so many areas around the nation where these types of irrational thinking are taking place. And, it gets into this whole issue of education about racism in schools and people who are reacting to that in a very, very unproductive and irrational way. By trying to close that down. I mean, I think as a leader, you pretty much just have to lead by what's true and what is right, and you just have to be very, very strong about that. And when somebody in a position of power asserts things that are so obviously unhealthy or wrong-minded or contradicting the actual facts on the ground, we just have to simply oppose that, and we have to take a stand against that, whether it's our own governor, which sometimes it is, or and obviously in the state of Missouri we face a lot of this type of thing. I mean, that's why we're a COVID hotspot, right? So I think we just have to stand very, very strong as leaders about what we think is right and what we think is healthy, and to speak up against these things that are just anti-factual and anti-humanitarian. And we have to assert our pushback in the strongest possible terms.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Sable Pitch is on the line here from Texas and said, "Yep, Texas Governor Abbott is making people crazy too." And so that's so you're so right. Take a stand. As a leader, I created the coin. I believe I always like to say it because I didn't have nobody else that said it. COVID crazy. There were so many things that happened once COVID started that was just not typical for the people that were doing it. That I just would walk to HR and I said, "Oh, here's another one for the COVID crazy category." Because sometimes pressure pushes you to a point of a reality that you've never thought existed, and then you respond in a way that is not, frankly, you. Or, and I know Dr. Luby can give you the ins and outs of this, it's a wartime you. The ethics that you use in peace is different than the ethics that you use in war. And sometimes the wartime versions of people who have power can just turn into some craziness, straight up craziness. And so it's important to have a social conscious or just a general consciousness about society and about what matters. We are souls first and staff second. Students are souls first and students second. So don't make a rule that makes them cringe to say, "What? You mean I got to go do this? I'm going to die." If that's the reaction from the general staff or students, whatever decision it was COVID crazy because you have to think about the circumstance. And so I would urge you to create a list of COVID crazy things. And if you had a history with people, like you knew that people were like before this, everything was sane or more sane, and now doing this, it's crazy, then chalk it up to having the conversation and say, hey, here's the data, here's my personal situation, here's what I think is best, here's the word on the street. Did you really intend to do this? Are you intending to ignore all of this data or this history or this relationship? Now, if the answer comes back to you, yep, I just don't give a flying flip, then that's when you need to, as Dr. Lou said, take a stand and be okay with the results after you've taken that stand. And Dr. Hines said that she came from Ferguson, so I have to just say my Ferguson two pieces. Now, most of you know, many of you know, I was the first African-American superintendent of Ferguson, Florissant at 33. And then after literally being there for 4 years, I became the superintendent for 3 years. But I knew that there was some crazy and that I couldn't destroy it. So I had to have a conversation with myself. Am I okay with loosening it off? I take this stance. Do I rather go along to get along, or do I rather have whatever may come to me because I can sleep at night saying, at least I stood for what I believe. And once I made that decision to stand for what I believe, all the hell came, and it was not hell. It was okay because I was at peace within my stance for who I am. Internal consistency. That's the short of it. Do not do a week or a month with internal inconsistency that rips your heart apart because you aren't being yourself to comply with something that may not be just right. Tactically give the data and the information and the plea that this isn't right. And then if it's totally inconsistent with what helps you live and be healthy and sane, then you have to make a difference. If you can't change people, change people. And so bottom line is change where you are, change the situation. Thank you for that. I'm coming to you, Dr. Kechnick. So Gary asked a really good question. Should leaders take the forefront on doing these things like vaccinations or taking certain positions or showing how to go through, how to change a policy because of the sake of taking relevance or making it relevant to the time and taking a look and a survey for the thing. I asked you that question because I know DESE, in my opinion, has always the most neutral and great answer, which is local control in most things. But I just wanted to see what your take was in this environment. What type of, should we have trailblazing leadership or should we have leading from behind? What would be your position on that?
Well, yeah, you're going to hear the right phrase that you just said, local control, that we believe in that. Of course, the governor believes in that, but I also have a tremendous amount of respect for our school leaders across the state, for their integrity and their ability to lead. And I don't doubt for 1 second that these leaders know what is best in their community. And I think sometimes it's more dangerous for us from here in Jefferson City to think that we can imagine what every community needs best over school leaders. It would be a mistake for me to think I know what's best for Jennings over you, Dr. McCoy, when you were there. So I depend on the leadership of our leaders to make those kinds of decisions. I do want to speak a little bit to Gary's other question, though, about safety for kids. One of the statistics we came across back in spring of 20, when everyone was in quarantine, is that hotline referrals actually went down. And I don't think anybody believes it's because kids were safer when they were at home. I think it's because they believed that when kids are in schools with teachers see things and report things, and they're looking out for the safety of kids. And so that makes me have to go back to where I started. Kids need to be in school with teachers, and you can't run a school without them. And so we do have a different kind of pandemic in the state. We don't have enough folks who want to serve as teachers. Everyone was talking about the 6 staying home. We actually hit a sub shortage this past year where we had to come up with new ways to get substitute teachers in our schools because school leaders couldn't find them, right? So one of the things that DESE is doing this year, and this is a great time for me to talk about it because we're releasing it this week, is we're investing $50 million into teacher recruitment and retention grants. And these are grants that are not competitive. They're going to go to every single school district, every single charter school in the state. And it's to bolster up their recruitment efforts, right? So that could be paras and subs you want to make into teachers. It could be high school kids who would be great teachers, pulling them into that pipeline. But then these retention grants also, which give school districts who know their community best options on doing things for their staff, right? That'll make the school a safer place. We'll be demonstrating that care for our teachers that they're going to need this year as we go into this year. So we're going to invest all of this money, and we're going to depend on our school leaders to come up with some great options on where they put that money, and we're just going to support them in that. And that's unprecedented. We've never put that kind of money into something like this, but I think we believe here that if we don't address recruitment and retention, the staffing challenges that we experienced last year are going to become the norm. And you can't run schools that way. And we saw it last year, and it's going to stay that way if we don't figure this out. And I think that's how you keep kids safe.
I totally agree. Support great leaders and let leaders lead and get out of the way. And that's so true. So true for government, so true for every level, federal, state, and even local, because teachers are leaders. And teachers taught me some of the greatest things, like having different roles in the classroom for different days of attendance or periods of attendance, so that the child doesn't sit in a seat with anybody else. Things like that came from teachers. Lines of tape around the borders of certain spots to keep 6 feet distance, and so many ideas. So let leaders lead and get out of the way. That's beautiful. I want to go to Gary because his hand was raised and have you share your thought or question.
Thanks, Dr. McCoy. I'll leave this to you to choose because I wanted to go two directions. I liked going back to the one direction on figuring out, how we think about programs. Are there excellent programs that are really focused on trauma that we should be encouraging our local schools to implement? Everyone's bringing new trauma this year, and I was just revisiting it as I heard of just all the new uncertainty we have. And we might not even be acknowledging how much fear and trauma this uncertainty is causing. I know I'm simply pushing it down and hoping it stays down and ignoring it. That's my strategy. I'm sure that's none of the doctors on the panel would think that's a good strategy. So I guess I'm interested in that. And I also wanted to ask and maybe give an opportunity for some of the medical folks on the panel. We talk about local control, and I guess a lot of issues, should be local control oriented, perhaps. To what extent do we have 2 or 3 soccer teams, and how do we build a new stadium? I'm wondering if vaccination should be a local control issue. I suspect the medical folks have a different answer than our governor would have. I wanted to ask that question.
That's a hot button, Gary. That's a new nickname. Let's start with that one. Should vaccinations be a local control issue? Who wants to go for that one?
Wow. Let's be clear. We are in a situation where, and there was a question in the thing that we have a number of different populations that aren't getting vaccinated. We that's the case. And if someone says, what's the fastest way of making us closer back to normal? If you come and you ask myself and all my colleagues, I actually say this is one thing we'd all agree on. We said, get everyone vaccinated. Right? Like everybody that's eligible, get them vaccinated. Once you get the kids, you get them all vaccinated. Of course, that's what you would do. And so, we're up against misinformation. We're up against the social media that can drive people to choose, to follow the TikTok, get teenagers and get young people are more into TikTok. And, I'm hearing about, things I've never even thought was possible. Like, that's what they're saying. Like, you're like, that's crazy. But they hear it and they think it's real. So we're up against that. And not the only, but one of the main ways you can do this is, you compel them and you make the compelling things, which you mandate vaccines, such as what they've done at our higher education places, such as St. Louis University, Washington University, other universities across the country, because now you have to get it, right? If you're on the fence, well, and that's what we're doing at BJC Healthcare, St. Louis University, Washington University, all of our healthcare system says, if you want to work here, you're getting the vaccine. So if that ain't, I would say, yes, we should do that. If you but as we all know, I should probably duck. There's probably something flying my way right now. But that's the reality.
That's right. Any opposing views.
Yeah,
I'm just-
I'm going to say one last thing since Florida was brought up. Now, I did not come
Yeah.
up with this. And so,
Uh-huh.
but a dear friend who's a brilliant individual, Dr. Paul Offit, I heard him say, he says, you know what? And I agree. He says, you know, what the virus, a political cartoon would be the virus shaking Ron DeSantis's hand after he's come up with not defunding schools. And the caption would say from the virus saying, thank you for your support. Because that's what you're doing, right? Like you're just thinking that's what the virus wants. Let's provide the virus. Don't vaccinate and don't get masks. That's what you're going to do.
Dr.
All right, that's a
McCoy,
good one.
I have wondered
go.
myself, I can't help but say it, but how did we get away with stop signs? You don't get a local choice about whether there's a stop sign. Everybody had to do it. So I guess I just kind of wonder, how did we pull that off?
That's exactly right. I totally agree with you. It's amazing. Miss Alexander, I see your hand up. Go for it.
So I want to go back to a couple things. The first, to respond to Dr. Ritter's question is just about should schools be advocates in the community. So especially in underserved urban communities, our school districts are the pillars of our communities. And so our communities thrive based upon the schools. And so if you look at data, when you have great schools, then people want to move there. So you have this unknown voice already because of where you are and what you do for students. And so I believe, and we've taken this stance in Jennings, that when something comes out, we're going to advocate for it. So when vaccinations came out, what did we do? We had a vaccination clinic. We called our community members and said, hey, we have additional vaccines, come get those. And so us being a voice saying we want you to be safe, because although our students were already in school, it was the next level for us to make sure that our educators were vaccinated, to make sure our community was vaccinated, because we live in a zip code that had at that point had the highest COVID rate, but we were still here. And we were here with little incident. And so being that vocal voice and an advocate as school leaders, whether it's the superintendent, the principal, the teacher, we're all in this together. And so advocating for our communities in vaccinations, whether it's the churches are other great pillars in the community that can get that word out. I believe that if whatever that vision is, and it's a shared vision, then those individuals need to get out there. The second thing about teacher retention, and I've shared this, Dr. McCormick, you were here in Jennings the whole time. This is my HR soapbox. Everybody has to go through a teacher. Everybody, from pre-K to 12, post-secondary, if that's the life that you choose to go through, somebody touches a teacher at every level. But for some reason, that most prestigious profession of being an educator is now something that people don't want to do. We pump up STEM, engineering, computer, technology, everything else, but we have failed to pump up the educational profession. And everybody from the President of the United States to the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies have to have a teacher or multiple teachers within their lives. And so the retention grant that DESE is putting out is great, but we also need to pivot a little bit more and pump up the education. Teachers are some of the lowest paid, is one of the lowest paid professions when we look at engineers and computer techs, but they give their life to service. And how do money is not a motivator for everybody, but if we can pay them just a little bit more for all the things that they do, because they work 24/7 and they care, they have a passion about what they do for children. So it's changing the thinking, not just in the state, but nationwide, about how we show gratitude for the educators in our community.
Yes, yes. Money is not the most important thing, but it's right below love and oxygen. I'm right there with you. All right. And so, yes, we need to pay our teachers better. And not only that, I want to say more about that, but I'm gonna go there later. Let me first get to this one important also point to Gary's question, and then I punted to Paul, and Paul said local was great. I have to say, and I try not to do I statements, but I have not seen any other superintendent in St. Louis, for sure, and Paul would know at the state level, that literally has done PSAs, public service announcements with hospital people to say, we need you to do this. Now, I mean, I was pretty far out there to the point of getting, pushback. But at the same time, being Black and understanding the Tuskegee Institute issue, I had to say it in a way that couched me to say, do what's best for your family. But this is what I'm doing for me and everybody that I love. I'm telling you to do it. And I was telling you because I love you, but do what's best for you. And frankly, that was my happy spot. I was happy with saying, because I love you, I'm telling you, this is what's best. I've done it myself, my child, my family, and now I'm saying to you because I'm walking the talk. So I do urge leaders to lead, and lead in your own way. Leading doesn't mean doing it like somebody else did it. Leading means doing it from the lens that you see, because frankly, you see lenses in ways, you see things in ways that others don't, that may be a much better way to influence and make things safe. Second point to Gary's question, which now is the second question about what mental health programs. It's hard being the moderator because I got so much content that I would love to give. I'm going to give an answer, then I'm going to have Dr. Luby give the best answer. But I know that she isn't a proponent of just one program. She's a proponent of the whole field, so she's going to give you a framework. But whatever it is, there are millions of programs out there. The efficacy of it is what matters. Doing it with fidelity, doing it with consistency, and making sure that it includes a few key things. And I tried to summarize those things. That's going to be in an article that comes out in Edutopia next week. And it was another one from Mental Health America, which I'm on the board of, into 5 Bs. So what strategies for mental health and trauma should you look for? You should look for 5 Bs. One that supports belonging, where everyone belongs and you having a sense of belonging and not feeling like an imposter syndrome in your own place of work or home or worship or whatever that may be, belonging. Number 2 is bonding. Bonding. Bonds are important. Every child needs a champion for them, an adult that champions them, a peer that will support them. But the root behind that champion is this bond that you need to ultimately make sure is there, where people feel like they have someone that it's okay to talk to when they don't feel like themselves, or when they feel like it's the end of themselves, or when they feel like life for them is never going right. Being okay with saying I'm not okay. That's the bond that we have to have. Thirdly, we have to have really a belief system and a system that supports really building yourself up, resilience. And so there's a high level of depression, there's a high level of suicide, there's a high level of a lot of isms, depression and more. And at times things do feel hopeless, or you do feel inadequate is the word, insufficient. But your belief system helps move you past that. And I often like to say something that's spiritual more so, that when nothing else helps, love lifts us. So being in a loving environment, love lifts. But that belief system is essential. Last, the 4B is boundaries. So there have to be clear boundaries on how far to go and how far not to go, and having boundaries, because to be frank with you, when you get into the area of bonding and belonging and love, belief systems, you can't just do that with anybody. Some people don't want your love, and they're like, that wasn't for you to do. It needs to be with the person that it has a natural relationship that facilitates that. So in a work environment, be careful to not go beyond the boundaries, establish the norms. And in a home situation, make sure you trust those family boundaries, so that you can have the right healthy touches. During COVID, no touching is safest, but there are some healthy touches, like fist bumps, like elbow bumps, like things of that nature. So boundaries are important. Lastly, simply put, Skinner, behavioral modification. Some people are just doing the wrong things. We were denying ourselves before COVID, to be frank. We were going without eating. We were going without vacationing. We were coming to work when we were sick. We had poor behavioral habits. And so behavioral modification, in the end of the day, this is what I've learned from Dr. Luby and watching her train my counselors in school and therapists towards parent-child interaction therapy and teacher-child interaction therapy. those were the essential things that I learned under her tutelage. And if your program for trauma doesn't have even half of those B's, then it's probably not worth doing. Dr. Luby, please add.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you just said, Art. I mean, it raises so many interesting issues. I mean, of course, there are so many programs that can be school-based that would really address the trauma, that can address some of these aspects of emotional development. And it could be that the COVID pandemic gives, it destigmatizes mental health in a way that might allow this in and allow this to become a more pervasive part of the educational program. I also think some of the things that Paul was talking about with teacher burnout and poor retention, what we're sort of doing is we're asking teachers to do new tasks that maybe they don't have the tools to perform these tasks. So, I mean, the other issue is giving teachers training and education in this aspect of emotion development and emotional intelligence and how they can implement these things in the schools. And that may help them to feel more protected, more competent, more effective. So I do think that the epidemic brings these opportunities to the fore. I also wanted to just mention one thing. You know, I think the other interesting thing that comes up when we were talking about local leaders and some of the leadership, both locally and nationwide, leaders that are espousing these things that we, you know, that are counterfactual. I mean, the other issue that comes up is how do we explain to children that not all leaders are true leaders? That, you know, how do we help them know the difference between a true leader and a false leader? And I think that's another point of elucidation that we need to drill down on.
I love it. I wrote a poem 20 years ago, and it was after I had some tutelage of a good leader. And the poem was, I put in the chat, and it said, "Am I a leader?" because that's really where we got some lightweight, low leaders in the house, and just glorified people that was in the previous position before that just happens to have a CEO title. That is so true. Not everybody's leaders. Some people are just in a seat by attrition. All right, I got to go to Mr. Dr. Technic, and I have to send a shout out to a dear friend who's a Salute to Excellence Stellar Award winning Dr. Roberts, Joyce, my friend, who's on here. She said, yeah, stop signs is a good point, but we got pushed back on seatbelts when we had to put those in places. So sometimes people don't always think clearly or the same or something, but it brings to bear the point that where there is no struggle, there is no progress. And so we got to struggle to make the progress. So on that point, how do we make that struggle real and the progress real for teacher salaries? Because that's important. If you pay more, you get to retain teachers, you get to attract teachers, you get to attract leaders, people who aren't afraid to lead, who can do it right. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I so appreciate Ms. Alexander's point to that. Taking care of teachers and trying to do things that make them feel cared for or whatever, that's part of the journey. But you know, when you think about compensation, it's really a value statement. And if you didn't realize where we compare, we have 8 border states, go around the clock: Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Arkansas, Tennessee, 8 border states. In the last 3 years, every one of those border states have done something to raise their starting pay. The last time the state of Missouri did anything on starting pay was in 2005. It's been 16 years here in Missouri, and it's only been 3 years in every one of our border states. They all starting pay is between 32 and 36. Ours by law is 25. And before you say to me, well, we don't really have teachers paid 25, we do. I can find them for you. We have 50 of them paid under 26,000 per year, fully certified, teaching in their content area, trying to pay off student loans, and they're getting paid 25 something. Go to Kohl's, you'll make more money. It's a value statement. And at the heart, people want to know that they matter, right? That they're respected and that they matter, not only to the kids who put a coffee cup on their desk at Christmas time, but they want to know that society themselves values them and what they do. And I think the real challenge this past year is teachers feeling like they didn't. Commissioner and I meet with a group of teachers every month, all through the pandemic. And I can tell you every one of those conversations ended up with at least a couple of them crying. And what they told us is we were heroes in spring of 2020 and we became villains as we made our way through the next school year. And we heard leaders say, no decision I can make was right. There weren't just people who kind of disagreed, polar opposites. And it's at that point that you begin to really ask yourself, am I valued in what I am doing? And compensation is a good way to show it. And when you leave something go for 16 years, try doing it with your garage. The day you go out to clean it, if you let it go for 16 years, you got a lot of work to do. And we have a lot of work to do in this state, or we're going to lose our teachers to our border states. Not hard to live in Missouri and teach in Illinois. Pretty easy drive.
I love it. Well said. You have to put your money where your heart is and not just your mouth. And we need to put more money into the pockets of teachers and valued. I think that, if there was only more time and there would be more discussions on this, because let me put it this way. I was able to segue from superintendent to more of a social engineer for workforce development, mental health, and diversity, inclusion, and equity. And the fact is so true that I got those experiences from being a teacher, and it's what business needs. It's what others need. And the amount of pay in those other areas it makes the education pay laughable. Paul said it well, you can get paid more codes. We had students making $20 to $25 an hour at 17 in our high school, and our own teachers had that same hourly rate for after school programs. And they were getting paid $20 to $25 an hour for construction work, to the point that our custodian said, well, Dr. McCoy, just give us the OSHA certification and we'll go work for those construction companies. And so it's becoming so inequitable that it is getting close to like almost a legal issue. Now, thankfully, our district is the top 5 in teacher salaries in the region. Only 5 are higher. So we do put our money where our mouth is, but we got a long ways to go to make that be true across the state in comparison to other fields. And so I'll say this much, with all of the money coming from COVID, and I'm talking $500 million to St. Louis City alone and others across the state, and with the understanding that the economy can't get back going until students get back into school and stay in school, now is our pinpoint period of leverage at every level, the local, the state, and the national level, to leverage that understanding with some change. And so we need to have an organized method and campaign to make that happen. But there'll be more on that. There are courses at St. Louis University and beyond that focus on this, and I look forward to speaking about that. But also I'm a leader of STL Works, which is getting St. Louis to work, and ultimately paying teachers and others for teaching in areas beyond the 4 walls of the classroom, so that they can be paid supplemental pay for giving some of this great knowledge and dispensing it so that we can continue to have a great society. Well, I know that our time is winding up. So in the last 7 minutes, and we have 6 panelists that are on the screen that I see, I want to give each of you 1 minute to say final closing remark of anything that you might not have got a chance to say or anything that you want to double down on that may be on your mind. And I'm going to start with the last person to have spoken. I'm going to start with Jason Newland, and then I'm going to work my way to Miss Alexander, then to Dr. Luby, then Paul Kecknick, and then Gary Ritter. Dr. Newland, go for it.
First, thank you to all of you out there, all the teachers, administrators, the panel, for all that you do for our children. B, C, D, C, A, C, you are true heroes and make the world better. And I think people like me who have now got to work with school people feel blessed and honored. It's just sad that it took a pandemic for me to do that. So first, thank you and so sorry. Lastly, I'll say, even in the face of the Delta variant and where we are, school can happen, school can be safe. You all have done that. You have shown how to do that. And the kids, as Dr. Katnick said, we know the best place for them, and that's in the classroom. And we know how to do that. And let's promote vaccination. Let's promote the things that work. Masking, keeping kids and staff out that are sick, wash our hands, keep some ventilation. And let's love one another, be kind, and we're going to get through this. And we will be, well, in 10 years, we'll tell some more stories about how we did it.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you. And much love to you, Jason, as always. That's why he's the Channel 5 answer guy, because he can go off the cuff in a second on any question. All right. All right. Ms. Alexander, go for it.
So I'll just close and thank you. I'm very honored to be upon such an esteemed panel. And so I would just say in closing that we as leaders need to be true and authentic to ourselves, because when we're faking it, our people know. And when it comes to teacher retention and recruitment, we need to be out there in the front lines, making sure that we are doing what we need to do to, first of all, provide for the staff that we already have, to take care of them holistically as we do our students. That now is going to how we are to treat our staff from a holistic standpoint. And so their social, mental, emotional, as well as their financial needs are important to us. So we need to make sure we encompass all of that and put some things in place where we can assist for them to have those tuition reimbursement moments. And from support staff to our teachers, because we do it for our teachers, but how often do we do it for our support staff members, our custodians who want to go back to school and become the teacher? Because in every role in education, your classroom just looks different. So a custodian can teach a student something. I can teach a student something. The actual certified teacher can teach the student something. Our classrooms just look different. And so what the pandemic has taught us, nothing else, if nothing else, is to be flexible in our thinking. And so as we move forward, because we're never going back to the normal, and we have to understand that the normal that we saw before March 2020, we're not going back there. And so to be flexible in our thinking and to reimagine education for what it is, because our 21st century students are very tech savvy. And so we are going to have to embrace that, and we need to support our teachers as we go along the way.
Thank you to our Trailblazing Missouri Association of Pupil Personnel President, Ms. Alexander. Thank you for those truths. I got people texting, I see them texting. That's great truths, great truths. Thank you so much. All right, let's go with Dr. Joan Luby.
So I guess I would just, in closing, I would just say, I think people in our society who help in the growth and development of children are the people who we have to value the most, and we have to really pay the most attention, because that's where the future lies. It's like growing a garden. We have to water it, we have to tend to it, we have to really pay, in order for it to bear fruit, we have to sort of nurture it early on. And so it's an incredibly important part of our society, and we need to value it. And I think the epidemic really made it very, very clear just how critical the role of teachers in schools are.
Thank you so much, Dr. Luby. We appreciate you and your guidance for our mental health and wellness. And Dr. Kechnick, Desi.
So as schools go, so does the state. Call it, slice it any way you want, standard of living, or workforce development, or whatever. It is the profession that creates all professions. The impact of the pandemic is going to be profound on a profession that was already struggling. And that should keep all of us up at night just a little bit. And Desi can't fight this fight alone. We're going to need every segment of society to come together and say, it's time for us to invest in education at the rate that it deserves and needs to be.
Thank you for being a champion for the decades that I've known you. You've always been one of my favorite people, and always so pleasant in disposition. You're always approachable. You answer every question. You're always been there. So thank you for being a leader. And what you said was so succinct. I pray that governors and others understand what you just said. We were taught in college that schools are isomorphic to society. Paul just flipped that and said, hey, so goes the school, so goes every industry. That's powerful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Ritter, the floor is yours. I want to thank you for allowing me to be the moderator, to have everybody get a little taste of what I do with some of my friends. Once or twice a month, we get together and we just say, hey, what's up? What's going on in your world? Thank you all for allowing me to do that. Dr. Ritter, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Dr. McCoy. It's been amazingly difficult 18 months for all of us on the screen, for all of us in our field. It's been an even tougher 14 months since George Floyd was murdered in May of last year. Everyone's been dealing with so much trauma, for our students, for our families, for our school leaders. even with that, when Dr. McCoy asked where I sit on the mood elevator, as you described it, I had to Google it to see what it was. I sit at grateful. I'm grateful to be in this field where the work we do, we don't have to do mental gymnastics to tell ourselves we're making a difference. This is a place where we can make a difference, where every day we can pursue what is all of our missions. In SLU, we call it higher purpose, greater good, but where we get to do work that's needed. And of course, now that work is needed more than ever. And just to close, my goal is for SLU and for the School of Education in particular at SLU to dig in with you all and support you in whatever way you need in doing this work. We're here for you and we want to continue to be. Thanks, Dr. McCoy.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the near future. Blessings to you all. Be well.
Thank you.